Good afternoon and welcome to the Reflective Coach podcast by Coach Luca. I don't tend to record introductions for interviews anymore, especially on a personalised level, as I've now tailored that approach. However, I just thought it necessary to record an introduction for this interview between two wonderful guests, Tayla Page, amputee footballer for England, and then Jordan Stringer, who's spoken about his health scares before, has previously appeared on the podcast and is a current coach in England. It's been a wonderful conversation between two people who talk about their health scares, their health issues, depression, recovery, and some other deeper elements as we spoke about during this conversation. This is just a bit of a heads up that this conversation does get very deep. It does talk about some darker areas of their lives and what they've experienced. It talks about medication, potential suicides. It talks about health scares, cancer. It talks about recovery. It talks about family. It talks about impacts on mental health. So this is just a bit of a heads up in terms of what you're going to experience in this episode, and just to take away as much as you can with two wonderful guests. But it does get very deep, and we look forward to your respect in listening to this episode whilst learning from it at all times.
Too bad, thank you.
I was just telling Tayla, mate, like how much of a difficult person you are, and you're really awkward to talk to, and it's going to be taking some time to chat to each other because I know you're quite a difficult guy.
Yeah, I can be, mate. I certainly can be.
So so obviously I introduced you both earlier in the week. So Jordan, Tayla, Jordan. You've both been on the podcast before. Tayla, obviously, on the Q&A series. Jordan, you've been on the education series, the Weekly Digest series, the Unsung Heroes Series. So you're quite a regular on the pod, and everyone should get to know you by now. And but it's going to be a great conversation because the last 20 minutes that I had with Tayla then was a fantastic conversation. So I know the way we were talking and the way that she's going to come across in this is going to be fantastic for what she has to share, and talking about some of our insights, and then looking at your both life stories, and then linking those together because some of the stuff you told me, Jordan, some of the stuff you told me, Tayla, it seems like you've both been through very similar experiences, but both been at very different parts you live, and both had other things going on in your lives, but you've got this shared experience, which we're going to bring you together to talk about this today. So it's like a little network sort of well-being group slash podcast slash conversation this afternoon. So I like the dynamics of it already.
Sounds good to me. Sounds therapeutic.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the whole point of it, mate, is to share these stories, but also to share these comparable experiences. And as you've said before, George, is if anyone can reach out to you and chat to you about your experiences and have those little groups, I think that's the most important thing. And this operates as a connecting point for others to listen to and go, all right, yeah, I will reach out to Jordan, or is there another group in my area, and things like that, right? So we're going to start off. Jordan, if you introduce yourself, give a little bit about your previous experience on the podcast, whereby the purpose of your conversation, the first ever one you've recorded, and that's going to be the context of today, right? And then we'll move into Tayla's introduction, okay?
Okay, no pressure. Yeah, I'm Jordan, from England, 27 from Essex. Excuse me, my voice is going again. Not good. But hopefully, from that, I learned a lot from doing that podcast with you, Luca. It was a good chance to open up about some of the experiences, and sometimes in life, well, not sometimes in life, life is a very tricky path. And it's just about sharing experiences, hoping to inspire others, to help encourage others to speak out too. And I hope that in any way possible that, we can help each other. And in this podcast today, I'm sure we'll all help each other one way or another.
And so from our first ever time of speaking, right, Jordan, you came on as part of the Unsung Heroes Series. And what was that story which you shared? Why did you come on? What was the point of your public speaking? Why did you do it?
Oh, yeah, it's just to, I hope for people to feel that they can get inspired, maybe, as one point. Another point is to make people not feel so alone, for people to come forward and talk about their experiences, to encourage them that they're never alone. And, in life, the motto really should be is that we've got so many people in this world, but we all need to help each other more where we should. So hopefully from that, and that first podcast that we did together, Lucas, it seems absolutely ages ago, to be fair.
I think we're actually coming up 2 years ago since we've recorded that, mate. So I think we've nailed a couple of, well, I'd say a good coming up 30 episodes between each other. So it would be cool to actually count that one. But when you first came on that podcast, you had that episode, you were talking about health issues and what you've been through in life, and the different adversities which you've experienced, different challenges. And we'll touch upon that more as we discuss part of this. So we got Jordan. He's a coach. He's had different health experiences. He's been regular on a podcast. The whole purpose and his values is to create a pathway where people can support and be there for each other, and share those different experiences, because we live in a very different type of world now, and sometimes it's difficult to live in the volatile world which you live in, because we do get to see a lot of that with what's close to home right now, as well as what's around us in the wider context. But there's a lot of unshared stories and moments where people experience these different things, and they perhaps don't speak to each other or share them. So we'll get to talk about Jordan's health a little bit more as the podcast opens up, and we'll do a comparable experience and link this background to mindset and resilience, which both you and Tayla have. And I'm both in awe that you have this approach to life. But Tayla, introduction from you.
Well, I'm Tayla. I'm 25 and I'm from the UK. I'm a above the knee amputee and a coach. And yeah, I do. Well, I don't let anything stop me. I just do what I can, where I can.
And so it's good, because we're all coaches. We're all here because we coach in different domains. So Tayla does some community coaching with different types of foundations, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Jordan's done community coaching. He does club football. I've done community school, club football, academy, for example. I know Tayla's done some academy and has different perspectives about the future and considerations about where she wants to go. And so as she said there, right, she's an England amputee footballer. She's recently played in the World Cup in 2024, which was a fantastic experience. And there's some very exciting times for the year ahead for her, which we were talking about before the episode started, including playing in the Amp Cup. She currently plays for Newcastle women's amputee squad, which is an incredible experience. She on the England camp, she's doing coaching, she's in uni, she's an avid traveller. So that's just to add a little bit more context about the amazing Tayla we have sat in front of us today. And Jord is a previous Essex Coach of the Year, currently back into coaching, and not long returned back into it after having a bit of a breather away from things because of where things were in your life.
Yeah, very true. But I'm very proud of you, Tayla, by listening to all of that.
Thank you.
So what we'll get started off with. So Tayla was is obviously an England amputee, and what she had gone through in terms of, being part of this team, and what life has led you to going has led you through, and the experiences which you've had. So if you just take us back a little bit, Tayla, about some of your story in terms of being an amputee footballer, some of the symptoms you started to experience when you were younger, and what led across that journey from being young to where you are now.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so I've always been a sporty player. I used to play football when I was younger. And then, well, it all started after I had my appendix out in 2013. I started just getting pain in my groin all the way down. Like, it just kept going on. I was told by many doctors that it was in my head. I was making it up. It took years to find out what was eventually wrong. But by that time, it was too late. I had CRPS, which is complex regional pain syndrome, which is to do with the nerve endings. but also known as the suicide disease, because it is as if you're breaking every bone in your body all at once, all the time. And I was in constant pain, wind, bed aches, water, anything touching my leg. I was in agony for 6 years. And then because, I was depressed, very suicidal, but I also knew that I wanted to live my life. I wanted to get married, have my own family, so I made the decision to have my leg amputated. And I had it a week after my 20th birthday. And it was the best decision I ever made, because now I am where I am. And I definitely wouldn't be where I am if I still had two legs. Obviously, like you say, I'm an England international player. I play for Newcastle. I'm a coach. I mentor. I do anything that I possibly can. And I won't let anything get in the way or stop me from doing that.
I think that's fascinating. Again, that mindset, which is what we're going to come back to, right, is how you've built that mindset over that time, considering what you said there around going through CRPS and that decision to have amputation. And you look at that 12-year period of when you had those experiences at the age of 2015 to 2025, from just having your appendix out, and then literally the domino effect of everything else which followed from that. Because in 2013 you would have thought, right, simple procedure, appendix out, and that would have been an isolated health issue, and you get to move on with life. And then suddenly you start to experience different pains, and then there's a different part of you which needs surgery and these other things which come along, which you would never have expected in 2013 when you had an appendix out, right? And that just shows like some of the things where it becomes unearthed, and some of the things which we go through which we don't expect in life, and it leads us to having perhaps a different life. A, at the first point when you said about suicide and some of the things you've gone through, and then B, to where you're at now. And I think that's some of the considerations. But when you talk about depression, that's going to be a tough thing to go through, especially at a younger age. And I know on our episode, which anyone can listen to it and get a little bit more detail on that, and just to recall some of that conversation, is when you went through that, you said that you lost a lot of friends during that time, and how that affected you as a young person. Obviously changed some of the experiences which you had in terms of expectation of school, and where some of these people have been in your life, and now the different types of friends which you have because of the incredible experiences of playing for England. And now I know and see a lot of posts on your socials of you with the England girls and sharing the great stories, and they're out doing things in their life and you're sharing it, and you have this amazing collection. And then when you go on camp, you're sharing pictures and little videos and stuff, which is awesome, and you're all doing your own little thing. But I think, again, what you said, where you went through for that depression to where you're at now, what a mindset which you have instilled to really look at what could be the most difficult thing. Because as you said there, you want to get married, you want to have a family, you want to go on and live life, there's things you want to achieve. And when you look at those different experiences in life, back then you could have gone, that's so far away, I can't actually see that happening. And that's what some people do. And they can't really see what they have in front of them and what's really available in the future either. So then that unfortunate decision where they commit suicide, unfortunately, and they don't come out positive on the other side, and they see that definitive answer rather than seeing what the outcomes could be long term. And I get to see that in a lot of people, and perhaps not in as extreme cases, right, whereby they can't always see the positives. No, it's not happening, and they can't see past now. But with your mindset there, getting through depression is a really difficult thing to get through, especially when you contemplate suicide. But how did you really cope during that time when you were experiencing that?
It's funny because I do look now, like back now, and I think I don't know how I did cope, because it's a long period of time where you're in pain, and as we know, pain's exhausting, it's tiring, it's it affects everything, your stress levels, but I think I'm just a very determined person, and that was just instilled in me to just never give up. And I just knew that obviously I wasn't making it up, and there was something wrong. I mean, you could see that there was something wrong because it was black and purple and it had no pulse, yet doctors were still saying that I was making it up. And it's like, it doesn't take a genius to work it out.
Yeah.
But it was also, I think it was more so what was stopping me from doing anything was my family, because I know that obviously if I done anything to myself, they'd be left without me. And for me, that hurts more because it's like they would no longer have a child and it would affect them. And I just didn't want to do that to them. But they've also said, like in that scenario, that they would never have, um, they would never have said it was my fault, because obviously they knew that the pain I was going through. So um, they were on suicide watch. They didn't know if one day they were going to wake up and I wasn't going to be here. And, that's really heartbreaking to hear now. But yeah, I mean, if it wasn't for that doctor saying yes, because he took one look at it and said, if you were my daughter, I'd have it amputated. It was like, wow, someone's actually listening. But if it wasn't for him, I know 100% I would not be here today, because it was that bad. And I just couldn't live life because I didn't have a life.
I think that's pretty incredible, George, when you think about that in that extent, because as Tayla said there, when her parents said that they were A, on suicide watch, but also B, when they said they wouldn't put any blame on her, it's also as if they were preparing for that instant to happen, and waking up. And almost when you see those pictures of Tayla around the house and knowing she isn't there, there's some sort of acceptance inside of, the a level of okayness over the level of upset, right? Whereby they've gone, we understood why she's done it. She's no longer here, but she's not in pain, and she's made that decision that she would have been happy with. And and considering the fact that happy and suicide, and you're looking at this as trying to add that up together, to some people would never really come together. But in your parents' perspective, there, Tayla, that sort of did try to marry up for their own mindset and own approach, and how they were trying to look at life in the worst case scenario to be prepared for it, but also understanding, the moral side of it, the emotional, the mental, the physical, and all these considerations. But I think what you said there, though, is when you consider the fact that your family would no longer be having a child in that perspective, how it would affect them, and considering them in the bigger picture, when you're the one going through the pain, when you're the one depressed, when you're the one, having those late nights, and perhaps being sick or going through pain, or constant back and forth with doctors, not getting the answers you want. It's for other people, they wouldn't really consider the wider group around them. It'd be, all right, I can't go through this anymore, and then that's where it leads them to make those decisions. Now, George, I know we've had some discussions around your health scares and stuff, right? And what you've been through. And I know that you've spoken about some of your mindset and emotions, and what you went through. Would you say that you ever got to a point where the feeling or thought was perhaps as deep as Tayla's there, and some of the things that might have crossed your mind? Or would you say that you didn't get to that point in your experience?
If I'm being totally upfront, yeah, I did go and get them same feelings. It got to one point, this was going back in 2019, so I recovered from my operation I had to have. I had testicular cancer, Taylor, so I've gone through all that, had the operation, thought it was coming to. And it was about 4 months after that, my mum had to have open heart surgery herself, and it just all got too much for me. I was absolutely, drained, both physically. I still was feeling pain in places that I didn't think you could get places in really with pain. And it just got to that point where I felt, yeah, I had enough. Mum was recovering after her open heart surgery and everything, but there was still effects from everything that happened in that 4 month span that was playing on my mind. I was thinking one day to the next, I can't go on like this. I just can't cope. And yeah, it just took one day where I thought, well, it was a day of a game day actually, Luca, and I just walked outside, went to nearby woods, and I thought, I can't do this anymore. And it took me a lot of feelings of what you was feeling, Taylor, in that respect of how's my family going to cope? You know, how are they going to deal with all this? So I could empathise on that, and it was the emergency services that came to my aid. If it wasn't for them, again, I probably wouldn't have been here today. It was a truly traumatic time. So I can only feel and understand how you felt, Taylor, in that respect, because there's a lot of things that go through racing your mind around then, doesn't it? And I think how I felt at the time is because of so many things being consumed that I was thinking. Don't know if you felt the same, but it was like my mind was being poisoned because it wasn't the reality of me as a person. It made me feel like I couldn't be in control of my actions. It was like, yeah, someone drugged me or someone, you know what I mean? It was that intense, and it felt like even though it was a bright day when that episode happened, all the colour had been taken out of my life. It all seemed black and white. And it was, yeah, it put me in that day of thinking, like, if we'd been open like shit, I couldn't think clearly at all. And as I say, if it wasn't for the emergency services, it could have been a different outcome, even though there was that family attachment in there as well. At the time, I felt like I was a burden, you know, and I suppose when you're vulnerable, you feel that, but is that for reality? Not really, because if there's people that are around you that support you and love you, they wouldn't think like that. And like Taylor, in the sense of like with Suicide Watch, in that sense, I had a crisis team daily as well to make sure that it wasn't going to develop like that. And I had to have that constantly for about a month, I'd say, which was quite intense, really. But it took until a mental health professional said to me, right, well, with everything that you've had to go through, it's a diagnosis of severe clinical depression. And he advised me go on tablets. I didn't want to be on tablets because I had someone that I knew that overdosed on medication through that. And that sort of put me on for guard, if you like, of, oh, I don't want to be reliant on these, you know? And it was until that he sat me down again and, you know, took his time with me and just said, if they're not for you, you can only just try. And I thought, well, I suppose because I wasn't getting sleep, I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating, all them sort of other combinations of feelings that come with mental health when it's at a dip were being affected. So I took that tablet, and that's when things started to change, and I was put onto a therapist to help me with my mental health. But I can share how you're feeling on that front, Taylor. It's a very, when you're in that position, you feel very isolated, don't you?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, no one can really understand how you feel unless you've gone through it yourself. I always say that to people because, you know, you hear people go, "Oh, I'm really depressed," and it's like, no, you're not. You haven't been in that situation where you've been rock bottom. So it frustrates me when people just like say it in like a conversation when, you know, people have actually gone through that, and it's hard, and it's very tough to get out of. Like, we're very lucky that we are here today and we are talking about it, and we are open to talk about it. You know, not a lot of people would be.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And I think as it's that saying, isn't it? It's okay to not be okay.
And I think what you say there, Taylor, is when you said, "Oh, right, we're here today and we're here to talk about and we get to share those experiences." When I thought about that in just that quick reflection then, I think the most important thing is that there's a friendship here between all of us, first and foremost, which is why we're here. And the great thing that we do get to experience those times to be here with other people like we are today, and get to really have this understanding where I can chat to Jordan in the week about, different types of football, and mug him off when it comes to Spurs constantly losing, or Taylor gets a little bit upset when Arsenal lose on the weekend, right? So sometimes it's good because we all have this little merry-go-round, because between me supporting Chelsea and losing, but winning last night, obviously, and I think Spurs are playing tonight, Jordan, and Arsenal are around there somewhere, right? We get to have these great conversations, and that's the important thing. And I think when you said there about going on medication, I think when you looked at reality of that person around you, Jordan, what you saw from them and that experience, you sort of compared that into the current experience and situation which you were in, and you didn't want that to get worse from what you saw by someone else in that further scenario. And when you were then severe clinically, had severe clinical depression, and you were told that you had this and you were given that medication, how long were you on that medication for? How long did it take you to get out of that depression? When you went to therapy, how much did that help you, and how long did you have therapy for?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I was put on therapy for a year, because it was psychotherapy that I had, to unravel a bit more deeply. In terms of for depression and medication, two different answers to that. The depression, it it wasn't an overnight thing, and I suppose it wouldn't be, but it did take a good 6 months, I'd say, easy for me to be on the right road of feeling that I could combat life somewhat. I was afraid to walk outside the front door really every single day, because when I was over in that field, then I was afraid there was people over there that might have known me, and they'll make comments about me. I mean, I remember on the day of when the emergency services came, there was some people that wasn't very supportive at all. I was like, I was only doing it to cause attention. Why waste your emergency services time? Like, he's only doing it for attention, and that sort of stuck with me as well, I suppose. But yeah, 6 months it took at least for me to even just go a few houses down, really, to walk and feel confident to. In terms of medication, again, if I'm being totally upfront, I'm still on that medication now, all these years on, because it helps me sleep. That's the one thing it does do. Um, you could say I could be dependent on it. I know that my GP and other services that I'm involved with mental health info background, should I need it, that they wanting to try and wean me off it gradually. But it's one of these, I suppose, risks when you do take any medication like that. However long you take it, it's going to take that amount of time to come out of your system as well. So it's going to have to be a brave step when that comes around. But I've got to make sure, again, I've got the things in place to help me get ready for that. And that means, I suppose, the close circle like us and family and that, but also need the health services to be on board too, to make sure that they're there in case I need it. Um, there was, if I'm going, this is diverting somewhat, but it's the same thing as mental health. Things need to change. The emphasis on it needs to change. The stigma needs to change. There was one time I went to A&E it not in as a bad state like I went over to that field that time, but I was feeling very vulnerable. And it took that time when I saw a mental health nurse, and she was so rude to me, and she went, "So you're telling me my job after 25 years," when she just asked me to tell her how I was feeling. And I said, "Well, this is how I'm feeling. I'm feeling very vulnerable." And she said, "Well, I've been in this job for 25 years. You're telling me what to do. What do you want me to do? Send you to a mental health section? Do you want to be sectioned? Is that what you want?" And I went, "No." And in that respect, I felt very, I suppose, again, unheard, like you said, Taylor, with people not listening really. But it's just that I needed someone to talk to because of how vulnerable that I felt at the time. So the whole emphasis, I mean, we're trying to cultivate this through the podcast and everything like that, but in the outer world with health, as I say, for the NHS and that, whatever, I'm going to be open. It needs to change. People need to be feel that it's not that you're causing to waste time, if you like, because there is people out there that do need help.
And I think that comes into play when we've both had these discussions, both me and Jordan and me and Taylor, right, where you both spoke to me about what your experiences have been with the NHS. And when you look to your family, which have been your closest and your first support network, and they're with you day in, day out, and they're going through their own things as well. Because I know, Taylor, when we've had a conversation, you said that there was health concerns, I believe, around your dad. And that was obviously going to have an impact on dynamic at home and cause a lot of stress for mum, because there's two of you now, going through something compared to one, and that changes the course of life compared to, say, where the year before was, and perhaps things you didn't expect, and that can be a big mental toll on her as well in that example, because where dad gets ill, that takes away that little bit of support for you, because obviously he's going through what he's going through and perhaps doesn't have that energy, because how it affected him. And George, it'd be the same with your mum, because then she's going through what she's going through, and she's going to get even more stress because of what you're going through and wanting to be there and being then diagnosed with depression. But from where both of you have spoken to me and your experiences, where you've got this close network of family around you and what you look for, the next place you would then go would be the health service, who are your professionals and the people that you look for those scientific answers for their health, right? And when you're palmed off, George, which in this essence you were, by that nurse, and what she tried to do to you to put it back on you and try and take away from where she felt that you were almost attacking her by being honest with her, because she was getting defensive in that response. She didn't give you that support, or especially for a time when you felt you needed it. And Taylor, you had a number of doctors who you went through first to finally get to someone who then said he'd be willing to take that on and get there. But you didn't have a very good experience throughout some of your time in that build up to amputation and some of your experiences with the health service.
No, I've had loads of bad experiences. Some that shouldn't be doctors now, because it's just, they've been rude. And I was saying to Luke, like, I was 13 in the hospital. My parents were just like popped out or something, and I had a doctor come like right up to me, like over me, and was like, "You're making this up. It's all in your head." And obviously, I'm a child. And when people keep saying this to you, you end up trying to, like, you overthink, and you're thinking, well, am I? And it's
You start to believe it, don't you? Yeah.
Exactly. Which, doesn't help. But I mean, doctors have palmed me off to like different clinics, and yes, I just have such a good and bad relationship with the NHS. Obviously, I'm so thankful for them, because obviously I've had my amputation. I'm getting free healthcare with, my prosthetics. Obviously, that's very expensive. But then in another way, it's like you never get the appointment on time. You have to wait. They tell you what to do, and it's like, but it's my body, I know what's wrong, I know how I'm feeling. So it's just like, it swings and roundabouts with the NHS.
Oh, absolutely. And I think this is it. I can relate to that because I'm very thankful, obviously, that they did the operation when it came to testicular cancer. But there's been times since then when I've had pain down below again. First thing they've said to me is, "Well, it's not cancer. Stop worrying." And I say, "Well, I'm not saying it is, but obviously it's going to be a concern because of past history and that, and you got that in evidence." And I think this is it. I've always perceived it as well that. Tell me if you feel differently, Taylor. I could be wrong, but you might feel the same. But because we're young, they look at us and think, well, you're young, there shouldn't be an issue, you know what I mean?
No.
And it's just like we've got to, but we're living with that problem every single day, aren't we? So, as you say, we know our body more than anybody else. But then when people say to you, is in your head, because I've had that so many times as well. It's very dismissive, isn't it? And it makes you feel like, again, like as you were saying, repeating it, but
Worthless.
you feel like you believe it, and you feel like, oh, is it me? Is it, okay, oh, and then you start beating yourself up,
Yeah.
and then you just feel like, oh God, like, and you say to yourself, I've said to me, like, oh, I've got to snap out of this, because is it really me? Yeah, okay, right. What's in my control? What's out of my control? And for the NHS, as we said before, it does have its wonderful perks to it. But I know I've also feel this though, that there's a lot of compassion that is not in there anymore that there used to be. You
Yeah.
know, and for cops and for it's got to change on that front. The whole approach in some ways have got to change. I thought I was always told that if you had a job spec, say for a doctor, a job spec, number one key point would be compassion. You know,
Yeah.
to help understand uh, a patient's issue. But that seems to be way down for this. I'm not even including respect now. They just do it for numbers, it seems, in some ways.
Yeah, there's not many doctors that have compassion anymore, if any. Like you say, I do feel the same. When I first had my leg amputated in the clinic I was at, I was the youngest one there. It was all kind of like old people, and again, it was as if, you know, they treat you as if you're an old person. Well, that's how they were treating me. So it was like, oh, she doesn't need this, she doesn't need that. Just be in your wheelchair, and it's like, but it's not as simple as that. You know, I'm young. I want to be living my life. I want to be walking. I want to be running, and it's just like that
Mm.
just didn't mean anything to them. So it's again, it's just they don't listen. They don't want to understand. There is nothing, no compassion, no nothing, nowhere.
No, and I think that's what you said, and it's, as you say, it's helped you in your journey. But it's like when that doctor said to you, "If you was my daughter, this is what I'd do." You know, I think in some ways, well, not some ways, a lot of ways, consultants need to take it in that vein of if they had their child, or even if it was themselves, what would they do in that situation?
Yeah.
Um, I think this is it. Is it was only until someone that I've spoken to with mental health that has said to me, and that was quite upfront, and I'm going to say it. They just said, like, people just look at sheets, they see what's on blood test forms. If they see it's all right, well, then off you go. They don't see it as a whole,
Yeah.
you know. And since they put it in that vein, even though it seems that it could have thought that, you get blinded, don't you, in a sense of they should see everything, but they don't really, you know. So yeah, it's sometimes it's a bit of a scary world, really. And we put these trust in these people to help save our lives, and I'm not saying that they're under strain or anything, because they are, with the current circumstances of the NHS. But as we say, something's got to change on that.
Yeah, and I think it's that change which is important, especially from what you've both experienced and those different times where you've had those different experiences, and unfortunately, the comebacks which you've had haven't been the greatest. And when you talk about psychotherapy there, Jordan, and what you've gone through, and perhaps, as you say, there could be a consideration whether you're reliant upon medication, which you have, right? When you've gone through psychotherapy, do you think there's an importance or a next step whereby you go through a bit of life coaching, which is different to therapy, and the importance of connecting that together, because therapy is obviously there for those reasons and psychoanalysis and what comes into it, and looking at the deep details of what you're going through and trying to rebuild some establishment between your thoughts. But when life coaching comes into it, it starts to coach you back into the person which you was, because you said that there was a fragment where you were this person but you felt lost in terms of that, and it really wasn't that as well. And so when would you think there's a point between therapy to then life coaching which is important?
I think so. I think with therapy, it does help you understand where you're at. But it's then next steps on when you say even discharged from its service, where do you go from there?
Mm.
And maybe there should be, I suppose, even workshops. Sorry, dare I say, to help people find themselves again as a person, what brings them as values into life, into their life, etc. But I suppose this is again where, again, it sounds like I'm criticizing, but if you have counselling of any degree, again, some sort of framework needs to change on that, because when you go into a therapy session, like when I opened up about for cancer, the first thing they said to me was, well, how did that make you feel in that respect, you know? And you think, well, surely that's common sense how it made you feel. It made you feel distraught. I've just had the big C. My mum's had open heart surgery, etc. That should be common sense in itself. You know what I mean? I mean, yeah, it could be a conversation breaker, maybe, in a sense of like open up about your emotions. But that's where psychotherapy comes in, because it delves right in. But if it's just like, of, well, how did that make you feel? I just feel like, you know what I mean? So in that sense, I think if there can be workshops or anything like that after therapy to enable, there is groups, but you've got to find them groups. They're not easy to locate. You know, there's endless things that could be invested, say, from the NHS to make life a bit easier, you know?
And so, Taylor, when you were going through the different segments of your life, right, did you have therapy or counseling or coaching or anything like that?
Yeah, I had a psychologist. Again, it's funny you say that. Literally, they always say, the first thing they always say to you is, "How are you feeling?" And it's like, well, how do you think I feel? Like, I'm in agony 24/7. Like, I don't want to be here. Like, that kind of scenario. But again, it took time to find someone that you can kind of trust and that you want to actually talk to. And then obviously I had to do it to then have my amputation, because they wanted to know that I was in like the right frame mind. And obviously I just wanted to get it off, live my life. But yeah, it's hard. Some people don't like talking, some people do, and it's just trying to find that balance of how you can help these people that need the help.
I think that's it. I think as well is, and this come from a therapist that I've had privately, like in for the last few years, and he said to me, sorry, one of the biggest things in life is language and how it's spoken to you. You know, and if you know, it put me in a different mind frame of things, if you like. So, as we said just then, how does that make you feel? If they put that in a different way, of like, well, we understand it might have brought you concerns, it might have made you feel really vulnerable on that. Can you expand on that? You know, that's a different way of putting it.
Yeah.
But it's just, I suppose, it's just that by for book, if you like, of how they go about things. And I suppose everyone's different, you know, in that respect. But that's always stood out to me. Sorry, of what he said is language is very important in any walk of life, and that's made me think in a lot of different instances since then of even how I talk with people or how people speak to me about things. I put in a different slant, you know.
And obviously, George, we've had discussions before around some of the other adversities in your life. So you've discussed that you've had dyspraxia, you've discussed some of the impacts of schooling and being a young kid and relationships with teachers and how that was affected and how that went on to impact your confidence. And obviously then your confidence would have been affected by recovery and going through, the experiences of the big C, as you put it, right? And Taylor, you would have gone through the same, where you've gone through depression yourself, you've lost confidence in the NHS, you've gone through your amputation, you've then had recovery. And I know there's been a lot of different adversities in both of your lives. And when people listen, they would say, right, the biggest adversity you've gone through, George, is cancer, and the biggest adversity you've gone through is your leg amputation, right, Tayla? And they're both huge, huge things, right? Don't get me wrong, and they're absolutely at the forefront of where your lives have been. But actually, when you look at it in some perspective, Tayla, I wouldn't say it's at the forefront of your life in everything that you do, because the forefront is coaching, is that positive mindset, is the future which you have, and being an amputee is part of who you are, and it's not the forefront, right? And George, it's the same for cancer. It's a big part of who you are, but it leads you to being a public speaker, it leads you to communicate, and leads you to helping other people. And yes, you've got an experience which you can share with others. But when you've gone through those different types of scenarios and emotions and experiences, which was the biggest sort of adversity? Was it depression? Was it what you actually went through, or was it the recovery actually after that and getting back into that mindset after being affected by both of those? So Tayla, if we start with you.
That's hard, because I feel like obviously, yes, I was depressed and everything, but once I knew that I wanted my leg amputated, my whole mindset changed straight away, and it was as if I made that decision, and it was going to happen no matter what. Like, I was going to find someone, and I was going to get it done, and I was going to, live my life. I knew the risks. I knew that I could still have pain after, but anything was better than what I had. And I think my positive mindset has always been the upfront of who I am now. Like, I'm a very, very positive person. Like, nothing really gets me down. Like, at the moment I'm injured from football, and obviously that affects me because I can't play football, I can't go to the gym, but it's, these things happen, you learn from it and you keep going. So I would say that would be mine.
Yeah, I think I can share with you on that, Taylor. I think it's when I was in pain with down below with the sea, all I just wanted was to be out of that pain. All right, it's left some other repercussions down the line and some other things that wasn't considered at the time. But I look on it now and I think, again, this is going to sound so deep without meaning to, but it's just like, if that wasn't caught, as I said to you before, Luca, if that cancer wasn't found by another team, the other team said to me, well, I'll see you again in 6 months' time. Where would I have been in 6 months' time? I could have been gone for all we know. And that sort of put me in different perspectives of life. And I think with that it's a chance for you, when you've had something significant like we both had Taylor, to channel that into something positive, to make our own life projects, our own unique little projects in life that we want to achieve, and that gives us satisfaction, because it makes us realize I think you have a life, whatever is thrown at you, let's try and make the best possible outcome, and let's try and make it as fulfilling as we possibly can. And yeah, with the coaching, I find it very rewarding. Do you find it rewarding as well, Taylor?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, especially with kids, obviously they say it as it is, but I'm that type of person that I'm not afraid of who I am or anything. So when they like come up to me and they're like, you got a robot leg, like, to me that's like, they're innocent, they're so sweet, they just want to know more, because it's just not known. Amputees are not known. So yeah, it is very rewarding, and like being a mentor for someone that who's gone through what I've gone through. It's amazing to be able to help other people, which is what I didn't have. So it's like I'm giving back what I didn't get, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I can share that, like Taylor, 100%. Yeah.
And I think that's the importance is sharing what you didn't get back as well, and trying to change that perspective on things. And when people say, "All right," when you said that, right, Taylor, where young people look at you and they say, "Oh, look at your robot leg." At times, how does that make you feel when you are coaching or you're in that context where you're trying to focus on coaching, you're trying to focus on giving something back, and then perhaps, okay, they've said it and you accept it because it's said so often, or you've heard it before and you know how you're going to deal with it, or is it? Does it just take you back a little bit for a few seconds because you're like, oh, I'm here to coach, and unfortunately, they've looked at me with something rather than looking at me as the coach, for example. Does that play in your mind any way?
I mean, yeah, it comes into your mind because obviously I know I'm different and I know I'm disabled. So you do get looked at differently. Obviously, I want that to be able to change, because I should be able to be looked at as if I'm just an ordinary person. I mean, I guess I'm kind of going through that at the moment with the girls that I was coaching at the college. They looked down upon me and were sniggling and laughing and commenting because, I was coaching on my crutches. And it's like, but what's that got to do with anything? Like, that just shows that I can do anything that I possibly can. Like, just because I have one leg doesn't mean I shouldn't be able to coach.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's the important thing is not looking at the way that someone is or something that whereby you have a perspective of them. It's about looking at their ability, and going, oh, do you know what, they're a really good coach and they're this and that, and okay, yes, she has a disability, okay, this is going to be a high pressured environment where she wants us to work in this dynamic, and perhaps she can't demonstrate it for certain reasons, right, because of some of the demands on that. But that doesn't matter because you get the players to do that and you get them to take part, and you're the coach whereby if they're developing as players, then you've done your job as a coach, right? So it shouldn't be looked at in terms of that way. And you could also argue in a way where you could go for job interviews and they go, well, why would we have someone who's got, a disability and coaching because they can't demonstrate and because they can't take part in the practicals as efficiently as someone else, right? It's none of that should even come into consideration because it's about who you are as a coach, and you just make adaptations around the way that you would need. So if you needed and wanted your sessions in other ways or an assistant coach, then that should be entirely possible because it's about the coach. It's what is in your mind. It's what you're able to deliver in your dialogue, in your session plan, and you're then facilitating a session for the players to take part and help them get better.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's how I want it to be like. And there needs to be change within that because people do still look at you as if, well, she's disabled, so she can't do this and she can't do that. And, that's not the case. It's just that I would have to adapt or I'd have to ask someone else to do it. But there's nothing wrong with doing it that way. So yeah, a lot of people could learn from that, and need to be able to adapt to that.
Mm. And when you look at life now, Jordan, and you're back coaching and you're loving some of the things which you send me and what you go through now, is that your real fulfillment that makes you think about everything other than what you went through in terms of that depression, what you went through in terms of that health scare? Does it completely change your mindset and you get to be in that coaching mindset and to be where you want to be, and then nothing else matters in that point?
No, absolutely, it does. I think yeah, it makes me forget about my problems for a couple of hours. But in a sense as well, I think it's, you know, as I've said to you before, I think it comes to when it's, because of working with the lads that I am at the moment, 21, 22, young age really. But when I look back on it in a sense of when I was 21, I had to see, these lads, touch wood, everything's okay with them. But that's what I try and instill into them in a sense of a mindset of, say it's a 90-minute match, you've got 90 minutes to make sure that it's not apologies, dogs. One sec. I'll just mute myself just for a second until they've settled down.
My bad. I was talking there, Taylor, and I realised I was muted, right? So I'm glad that you pulled that face at me to make me realise, right?
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
But I think before Jordan comes back and continues on his point there, is it takes confidence to come back into these things, right? Because obviously he had to get confident into being back on the pitch. He had to find that confidence to talk to the boys again. He had to find confidence to maybe take part in demonstrations. And, you know, he went through physio and he went through different types of recovery. And I know you've gone through physio and recovery at the same time. And that can take away confidence in that respect as well. But when your confidence can be hit, and you've spoken about this to me in different you know, settings and you know, off the podcast as well, right? And you've touched upon it where, you know, the girls have laughed at you, and that can really affect your confidence because A, it makes you frustrated, B, it makes you upset, and then C, any other emotions that you personally experience from that is, well, why do I want to go back in and coach these people if they don't have that respect for me? And how's that going to affect me going in next week? Do I want to go in next week? Am I feeling motivated? And when you lack that confidence in the things that can be impacted, then it does take away some different perspectives.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it takes time to get confidence. It doesn't come overnight. It's all about getting back and doing something. Like if it's something that you love, you know, you've got to, as they say, get off the horse and go again. You know, you've got to give it your all and get back out there, because if you don't, then you're never gonna know how you feel or how anyone else is gonna feel. So it's a bit like me at the moment with not coaching. I'm a bit wary of going back because of the circumstances I've been through, which you know about, with like discrimination and everything. But I also know that it's something that I want to do and it's something I love. And if I want to stick at it, then I've got to get back doing it. And it's okay to make mistakes. That's part of learning, and that's how, you know, it's all going to be. So I'm looking forward to getting a fresh start and coaching again and just being me.
And I think that's the important thing, is the fact that you are being and as you are being you, that you can continue to get back into coaching, because that you want to be a coach long term, that you want to get back into it. In some of these moments where you take away, you know, knocks of confidence and other things that come into it, you start to go, well, why would I want to coach? Why would I want to go back into this situation? And that can take away from what your long-term ambition or your long-term dream is. And that shouldn't be the reality of it just because you've had a bit of a setback, or, you know, a bit of I say a bit, right? It is a setback, but in terms of that mindset, it's a bit which shouldn't affect that absolute mentality, which I alluded to at the start of the conversation, where you have this mentality of, when we spoke before, you want to be the best coach, the best coach who is an amputee, right? You want to go out to America, you want to coach, you want to achieve these high things in what you've said, right? And I think that's the mindset of high standards of what you expect of yourself. So why would you go back on your own self standards, your own self values, because you've looked or perhaps been open to affirmation from somewhere else, whereby, you know, other people have said negative comments? So technically that's a level of affirmation, because they're not giving you what you would expect in your mind, and therefore that's impacted you. So it's then switching that mindset to go, actually, that doesn't really matter. Yes, I'm going to consider it because they've said it and it's towards me and it includes me and that it should be addressed in some way, etc. But aside from that, and isolating that in my own mindset, I'm still going to achieve regardless of where they go in life. And I'm going to be this coach, and I'm going to work with groups of players who are going to respect me and respond to me. And then that'll be a very different time through some of the low feelings which I'm experiencing from this area where I've had, unfortunately, discrimination. But there is an opening, because our mindsets are so much more than what has been posed to us in those scenarios.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like you say, it is all about having that end goal and that future in the back of your mind, and knowing that just because something bad's happened, and yes, it was bad, it hurt, and yes, it should be addressed, doesn't mean that it should stop what I'm doing and what I love to do. So it's just about, going somewhere new, starting again, and just working from there.
George, before you went off to do your mastery in terms of your dog whispering, right? Let's just go back to your point where you're at.
Yeah, apologies about that, both of you. But yeah, I think I say to the boys, because it's 90 minutes in the sense of it's these 90 minutes and it's same mindset every week. Don't leave that pitch without any regrets, because it's a chance for you to, express yourself for them 90 minutes. Give them for freedom, give them for fun, give them for enjoyment of being part of something special. Playing football at any level, coaching at any level is a luxury, isn't it? And we've got to embrace them moments. So that is what we try and instill every single week: is don't leave the pitch with any regrets, because obviously, you know, as players and as coaches, yeah, we love to see silverware, we love to see all them different bits and pieces, but it's about developing the mindset of other individuals as well, to find them have the right path in life. And that's a big part of what I do for coaching. I enjoy doing for coaching, is helping them discover them as people, because everyone, as we know, have different lifestyles, different adversities that they've overcome. So it's trying to unlock that over a period of time, and using them 90 minutes, I suppose, every week to use that as a fuel for motive to push and push and push. And as you said, I think with that, Taylor, is it's very important with, you know, whatever we face as us two, with whatever you have to face as well, Luca, like, it's it shouldn't stop us for what we do, which we enjoy doing, you know, and it makes us push to that next step of, yeah, we're hungry and we're ready, to take on the world.
100%.
So now, George, I think this has moved us into a nice part where I really want to focus on you two and your aspirations for the future and the most incredible things which you have now within your lives. Now, George, you're back into coaching, and you want to be the best again, and you want to, go back to in a mindset where your aspirations of coaching are back on track, right? And you get more involved into it, and there's some opportunities in the future, right? But you're enjoying where you're at now. You've returned to it. Where do you want to be in coaching in 5 years? Do you want to have your own team? Do you want to be chairman of a club? Do you want to be coaching abroad? Do you want to be, unfortunately, coaching at Tottenham Hotspur? Right? Where do you want to be?
To be honest with you, if I gone in with Tottenham, I think I'd be sacked in a few minutes with Daniel Levy. I think that, yeah, obviously, even representing Spurs even at like the foundation levels, or um, within the community, would be an honour to represent the club that you love and support. That'd be nice. That is, I suppose, a dream. Who knows? But I think it's just in this moment in time. I was saying about a minute ago, no regrets. I've been very fortunate with the group of lads that I've got at the moment, that I knew them from about 3, 4 years ago, at a previous setting. And we've got a lot of unfinished business. And I feel that if we can stabilise this team, stabilise this club, and keep on pushing relentlessly every single week for the next couple of years, we'll see where it takes us. It's an exciting project to be part of, and I'd like to stay here as long as I can with this team. But if there's an opportunity to come up with coaching again, managing, if there's something that comes up, something to consider, I'm not gonna rule it out. Obviously, you can't do, but I just want to. I just want to continue what was left off from them years ago, and to push on now to make this a successful and sustainable football club.
I think that's the most important thing, is that you had a group to get back involved in and they knew you and you had those relationships, because having those relationships can just get you back into the swing of things when you've had some time out from coaching, and that can be separate from health issues, right? Because going back into those environments and new environments can be tough for the first time. But when you've gone into it and you've got a good team around you now and it seems to be going in good places, back when you were with Chelmsford Town and you were with the reserves and you were suited, you were booted, you were running across pitches in high aspirations and happiness, right, mate? And they're amazing pictures to look back upon. But as you said, it's about getting back into it and recreating those moments, because they're moments which you've always got with you and they're incredible, but you want to keep refreshing them and adding them and taking those new steps forward, right? Back when you were coaching, did you have your C license, or where were you at with your licenses?
Yeah, so C license, so level 2, yeah, up to my level 2 C license equivalent. So B license is next. I'm keen on doing that whenever the opportunity can present itself that I feel right, stable with health, stable with everything else, to go for it. As you say, it's all about creating memories. I'm not going to repeat word for word because there's an F-bomb in there, but as Justin Edinburgh once said, I'm not here for the sake of it. I'm here for the effing memories, you know. And again, that's it. Is when you're playing, you know, if you'd like to call it that, there is a time frame on playing, but there isn't in coaching. In an essence, if you like, I mean, you can play it as long as you want, but that's why I say it's about creating and making for most in it for them lads for their playing days, to have a lot of memories and to create a lot of history behind themselves. To look back when I want them to have grandchildren of their own, saying, you know what, was really proud to be part of this team. You know, not in that vein. That was very poor the attempt, but you know what I'm trying to say. It's about creating a legacy as well, and you want to continue that tradition all the way. So yeah, B license is next. I'm excited because I think they're starting rolling them out in Essex now. So I've just got to keep an eye out for one when one's available and hopefully get my face on there.
Well, there we go then. I could be having a discussion with two people who could be going through their B license experience together, because I know that's the next step on Taylor's plan. And George, you just said it there. So you actually could both collaborate and actually experience that UEFA B license through the English pathway, because you both would be stepping through that pathway, which would be interesting. And I think that's going to be the incredible thing, because we get to talk about that in a different conversation another time on the Coaching Insight series, where you both get to be on your B, and we'll have another episode on that. So that's already a great idea to have. But Taylor, you have been doing security coaching for a foundation. You're doing your C license, or have done your C license preparation, and you've enrolled onto it, and you have some assignments up and coming, but the aspiration is the B license. But whilst you go through your C license, you have big aspirations for where you want to go with things. So I'll let you talk about your aspirations.
So I'm doing my UEFA at the moment. It's kind of a bit on hold with everything going on, but I will get it done, because you do get like 3 years to complete it. I'm not going to take that long because that's too long. But yeah, so I want to finish that soon, and then I'm going to do the add-on year at uni, which is next year, which would be the BC Honours degree. And then we get the opportunity to do UEFA B while on that. So I want to do that. And then my ultimate goal is to move abroad to coach in academy level, preferably America, just because I know that they're very ahead of us. They're very good with disability. Being a woman and being having a disability, it kind of goes in my favor in that sense. I want to be the first female amputee coach. And I also obviously want to, you were saying, what would you want to do in the next 5 years? Playing, I want to win the World Cup, because that's in the next 4 years.
I love that.
I think that would be incredible. Imagine us talking to a World Cup winner in 4 years' time, right, George? Because Taylor's still going to be here with us when she's big time and remembering us for who we are and where she first started and who helped her get there, right? But that's the most interesting thing, because as me and Tayla were talking about before we started this, was she's got something exciting this year to look forward to, and that is the AMP Cup, which will be taking place in Poland, and that's going to be Poland and Ukraine, which they will be playing. That's going to be taking place in June, if I'm correct there, Tayla, and that takes place every year as well. But the one to look forward to is the AMP Cup this year. They're possibly looking at the Nations League, there's the Euros and the World Cup to look forward to. So there's already perhaps 3 AMP Cups you could play, and then a second World Cup. By the time the next 4 years happens, you could be a B licensed coach, a BSc honors holder. You could potentially be out in America at this point, but if you're not, you still are in an incredible place. So I think when you get to look at those aspirations and where you want to go with things, and even if you're not where you want to be with coaching as such, you're going to be in a World Cup and you're going to be having these experiences, and it'll be interesting to see where the next World Cup is. But the AMP Cup is the next one to look forward to. How do you feel your chances look for this upcoming cup competition?
I think we've got a really good chance. I mean, in the World Cup, we played Ukraine. They're a very, very new team, so they're still like developing and everything. But we beat them, and I do feel like we have a really good chance against Poland, because when we went to play them last year before the World Cup, we only lost 1-0 and 2-0. So it wasn't like, we were still pretty close. And at that point, we didn't have a very strong team, whereas we're a lot stronger, we're more connected, we gel better, we've got the right coach, we're getting the right, getting taught the right things. So I feel like we've got a really good shot of winning that cup, which would be amazing, incredible, especially after coming 5th in the world. And then I got my cap a couple weeks ago, so that's up on the wall. And then I have a poster of the World Cup with like all of my players and the coaches. So yeah, it's just like you say, it's about creating those memories and having those things that mean so much to you.
You're so inspirational, Tayla.
I think that's the thing which I've taken away from, as I speak to both of you, in terms of the conversations which you have, is that inspiration which I get and that mindset which is incredible, but also to see where we've been at on this journey over me and you, Jordan, last 2 years, and having seen your Facebook posts for many years before that as well, and Tayla, in terms of seeing what she says on social media, but also getting to talk to her and seeing her journey as well, and looking at the futures ahead. And I think that's the most incredible thing, is what you've both got to offer and where you're going to go with things as well, because you never know, your teams might go head to head at some point if you ever get that opportunity. And I think that'll be a great game, the mindset of Tayla Page versus Jordan Stringer, the tactical analysis of the game, right? I'm just going to say there's no point managing against me, because you would have, my teams would annihilate you. You wouldn't even touch my team, right? And that'd be even with the worst team. But I think there's exciting times to be had, and I think there's lots of scope for where the future looks in those things. But I think it's a great conversation, because we've been able to talk about some of the darkest moments. We've been able to talk about some of the things we've gone through, especially yourselves, and facilitate that conversation. You've gone through where things need to change. You've gone through what's been your biggest and closest support network, which has been family. We spoke about depression. We spoke about adversity. We spoke about recovery. We spoke about psychotherapy. We spoke about counseling and psychologists. We spoke about future aspirations and where we want to go with things. We've spoken about our effects with other people and responses, and how that's impacted confidence. And there's been a lot of things which we've really covered over the last hour. And I didn't want to make this too intense, because sometimes it can be a really in-depth conversation where we have covered a lot in that detail, and some of the deeper levels where some of the listeners will be taken back by. And I think an hour encapsulates exactly what our conversation has been, and taking some of the intensity off both of you in those stories, because you've spoken about it before, and I know you continue to talk about it in the other works you do. But I felt it was important to bring you both together to make a comparison of your experiences by connecting them together, because you've both had those separate experiences, but you've both been very closely linked in terms of the experience itself. And I think sharing that from two people who've gone through that, and the areas of support other people can look to, and listening to your stories, and again going back and listening to your separate episodes, there's so much more which people can take away and be enlightened to. But I think it's going to be interesting to see the future, where we're all going to be at, individually and collectively. George, is there anything else you wanted to put in there?
No, I think you're absolutely spot on. I mean, this is a question that I'll put to you both. How I feel is, so the question that I'll say is, if you could turn back the clock and you were stood in front of a mirror, what would you say to yourself going into life? Because if it was me, I would say everything will be okay in the end.
I would say everything happens for a reason. Just keep going.
I would say always expect the worst, because you can plan for it, you can deal with it, but you're going to move forward, and there's going to be a positive outcome, because your life still matters and you get to live the life that you want regardless of the darkest moments. It's just how you change your mindset to take that step forward.
Love that. Love that, both.
Tayla, is there anything else you wanted to include before we finished?
No, I think you've got everything.
Well, if anyone wants to listen, there's two great individual episodes they can listen back to on a podcast between myself and Tayla, between myself and Jordan. And now you get the collective of all three of us in one conversation. So you're very lucky people to get to listen to these wonderful individuals. As always, if you feel like this has affected you, or you feel like you want more support, or you want someone to reach out to, then Jordan is very open to that as always. And you can connect with him on his socials. Jord, what are your socials?
Yeah, so you can get me on my Facebook. You can get me on my which is just Jordan Strinner. You can get me on my Instagram, which I don't know. Would it be best to read it out, or can you like tag it in for?
We'll tag that in at the end, and we'll put that out there as well. So I think that's interesting. Tayla, obviously you've got a lot which you share about the World Cups and your teams, and what you're doing, and continue to share your story, where we've not only seen you on the podcast, but you've also appeared on TV appearances, and you also continue to share that. But if you want to share your story across your socials, people can find you at
just Tayla Page, and then my Instagram is Tayla Page 17.
Yes, very good Instagram. I recommend following, because Tayla is quite frequent on there and does a very good job. But it's been a wonderful episode. Really appreciative of both of you taking your time out of your day. Jordan gets to go back to playing Foot Manager and uplining his tactics in preparation for the weekend, and Tayla gets to do some assignment writing. So it's a great week for all of us, certainly to be had. But it's a big thank you from me, and I suppose there's a big thank you from the guys as well.
No, thank you.
Yeah, thank you as well, Luca, for having us on.
Pleasure as always, my friends.
But yeah, we try to be that group that can help be there for the players as a three, because I think you mentioned earlier, you want to have different characters in the changing room. You want to have different personalities. You don't want the same kind of people, because you're not going to be able to move forward. If you've got 10 people and they all agree the same things, you're going to get to a point in time where actually you're going to become unstuck. You need that one person to actually be like, nah, I don't agree with that. Or actually, we should try this. And I think that's why the huddle works, is we're all quite different as human beings. And I think you need 3 different people in there, because some players will naturally gravitate towards me and my personality, but equally some might go to the other 2, and that's absolutely fine.